to be what we've had in Dallas, Texas yesterday, technically last night. Blood for blood appears to have been what took place. A sniper, apparently, firing on policemen, targeting policemen, apparently, in Dallas, Texas. You may have heard about it by now. The Dallas shooting is apparently the deadliest day for United States law enforcement since 9/11. This has been dominating the news for quite a long time now, about, I'd say, close to 15 hours now. We've been talking about this all over the place on social media and on different web forums. People have been posting about this. Very interesting details coming out. The BBC's been doing very good comprehensive reporting. Also, local newspapers. The Houston Chronicle has been doing excellent reporting on the shooting in Dallas, and I want to share with you some updates about what's happened. A sniper opened fire at a Dallas protest as demonstrators rallied against the latest shootings of black men. Now, you may have remembered there were two shootings, one of a gentleman named Castile and another one of another person who was shot at as well. I apologize, I don't recall the name at this point, but there were two black men who were fired at by the police and killed. And there's still investigations into how it happened, what the circumstances were. Most people don't believe that it was justified. I'll give my opinion on that a little bit later. One case was a man who had a concealed carry weapons permit, and he was shot in his car by the policeman when he was reaching for his permit. Apparently, the policeman thought that he was reaching for a gun and shot him. I think the number was 5 times in the abdomen, killing him. And this was live streamed on Facebook. Again, showing the power of technology, live streamed on Facebook, because no matter what side you're on, no matter who you think is right or wrong, in a case like this, the facts don't lie. And that's one of the beautiful things about technology, is that the facts simply do not lie. When you've got a source like Facebook Messenger and you're streaming that information out there, it's out there. There's no skewing the facts at that point. Once the information is out there to be viewed by everyone, it's pretty much it's undisputable what has happened. So we can see that a man was shot in his car with a 4-year-old child in the backseat. I think the number was 4 years old in the backseat, and his girlfriend in the passenger seat. And the man has been shot. So we can see that. That's easy to see. Now, you can talk about motives. You can talk about, is it justified? And that's a topic for not right now. We'll talk about that today, but not right now. So we can see all of these things by watching the video, though. And people have different opinions about what happened. Personally, do I think that shooting was justified? No, I don't. Do I think that the proper response is to gun down 5 cops? No, because that's blood for blood. And that's not how the justice system works. It's not how the American criminal justice system works. It's a complete ridiculous skewing of justice, because how is it okay to shoot 5 people in an unrelated city for a crime that happened miles away with a different police force, a different individual who may or may not have different prejudices than the 5 people you shot? Because if you're firing at random people, you don't know what their motivations are. You might have shot the cop in the Dallas Police Department who was trying to stop any possible racism in the Dallas Police Department. You don't know at that point. So obviously, it's useless to tell people that it wasn't justified to shoot 5 people, because we all know that. That's like saying, 9/11 wasn't justified. Well, we all know that. That's an obvious fact at this point. But I want to give a little bit of a refresher on what's happened according to the reports that we've gotten so far, because we don't have all the details right now. I will tell you what I've gotten from my experience so far, from just witnessing things that I've witnessed so far, from listening to police scanners, from reading web forums of people listening to police scanners, from eyewitness photos and Twitter videos that we've gotten of what happened in Dallas. I want to give you a little bit of what I've seen that has not really been reported very much in the media, particularly on TV. You're not going to see much of anything that we're going to talk about right now. On the web, there's been a report that the person that the police were looking for, and this was from the police scanner, was wearing a camo shirt and shorts. Okay? So that's pretty simple stuff. Lots of people wear camo shirts and shorts, but normally that would just be okay. That's a good suspect description. They'll go after him. All right, that would be the end of that. But there was a photo that was taken of a gentleman who was open carrying an AR-15 at that protest in Dallas. At least that's what the person who posted the photo alleged, walking down the street with that AR-15. Now, the weapon I don't think matters that much, to be quite honest with you, because we could talk about, we need to control guns. I don't know. We talk about, control the weaponry. That's not going to solve any problems, because a crime was committed with a weapon. that may or may not have been acquired legally, and it's still legal to obtain a weapon, but it's not legal to commit a crime with that weapon. So what's the point of even trying to talk about the weaponry itself? It doesn't matter that much, but just for technical accuracy, it appears to my untrained eyes to have been an AR-15. I've had experience with AR-15s. I've fired AR-15s. I've seen plenty of them. So I'm not saying that as an anti-gun person by any means whatsoever, because I'm not one at all as a gun owner anyway. But as of 12:59 Dallas time that same day, 5 officers were confirmed dead, with reports of 7 others injured by gunfire. At least 2 snipers, they say, on the Houston Chronicle, ambushed the officers from elevated points of view, some shots in the back, according to the Dallas Police Chief David Brown. Now, the suspect description of the guy in the camo shirt and the shorts, that could have been someone at the Black Lives Matter protest who was simply open carrying as a matter of protest to say African Americans can carry weapons. We can do that, and there's not anything you can do about that. And that's a fine way of protesting, to be quite frank. While I don't agree with the Black Lives Matter movement, I don't agree with where it's getting its funding from. I don't agree with most of its motives, which seem very pure on its face, but when you look at them in application, don't really make any sense at all. I don't agree with that movement, but I do agree that if you are in a state that allows open carrying, you absolutely have a right to open carry, no matter what your political affiliations are. So if he's someone who's unrelated to the shooting who happened to have been open carrying as a matter of protest, that's fine. And it makes sense that he would be named as a suspect during the preliminary chase because, there's everyone who has a gun now is the suspect, essentially, when there's a shooting in the initial chase of the thing. But most shockingly, according to the Houston Chronicle, the videos flooding in from citizens participating in the protest painted the true horror of the event. And I saw a video from someone who was in a building, a higher level of a building, filming the protest as it was going by, and you hear the shots. And I'll admit, I'm not a weapons specialist by any means, but I can identify what small arms fire sounds like, if you know what I mean. Like certain rounds sound a certain way. Like, for instance, AK-47s, when you hear them from a distance, usually sound like twigs breaking in a rush of air. It's sort of got that sound to it. It sounds like a cartoon gun sound almost. It's got that like whistly sort of like twig breaking sound to it. It's interesting. And it didn't sound like that. Now, AR-15s have sort of a plinky sound to them. Again, a little bit different. 223 sounds a little bit different. This sounded to me like 308. Now, I could be proven completely wrong, but to my ears, my untrained ears, it sounded like 308, which would make sense from the sniper narrative. They talk about the 2 snipers. 308 is a commonly used round for marksmen. In fact, 308 is 7.62 by 51 NATO, which is actually a common sniper round anyway in NATO armed forces. So this would make sense perfectly. But the videos show the confusion felt by the civilians and the shaken terror they felt while being in the midst of the incident. Apparently, there were people at a Greyhound bus station who were stuck inside the Greyhound bus station. They brought them down into the basement for safety. Now looking over at the BBC for some international perspective, the Dallas police chief says that the gunman wanted to kill whites. So was there a race motivator in this shooting? 5 Dallas police officers were killed and 7 wounded. 3 people are now in custody. We don't know their names at the moment. Mr. Brown said the suspect had been killed by the police. We're talking about the police chief, David Brown. Mr. Brown said the suspect had been killed by police and he used explosives placed by a robot to end a tense standoff where he was holed up. Before that, he had spoken to a negotiator, and he said that he was upset about Black Lives Matter protest movement. And he said that he was upset about the recent police shootings. Mr. Brown told a news conference the suspect said that he was upset at white people. The suspect stated that he wanted to kill white people, especially white police officers. Now, that's not coming from me. This is coming from the police chief. Mr. Brown added that the man had said that he was not affiliated with any groups and he acted alone. However, the police have said that they believe more than one gunman was involved because, remember, the Houston Chronicle says 3 suspects are in custody. The gunfire broke out at about 10 o'clock, about 10 o'clock, 10:45 their time in Dallas as demonstrators marched through the city. Police described the ambush as carefully planned and executed. The protest came after this week's deaths of Philando Castile and Alton Sterling in Louisiana. Sterling being the man who was shot in his car. President Barack Obama, who is attending a NATO summit right now in Poland, called it a vicious, calculated, and despicable attack on law enforcement. He said the entire city of Dallas was grieving, and the tight-knit U.S. police community feels a loss to their core. So that's the international perspective on what's happened in Dallas, Texas. Certainly a bizarre event in terms of the likelihood of it happening. You don't think about this sort of thing happening ever. It's just not something that comes to mind. It seems like something out of a movie almost. I know that's the common thing that people always say, you know, oh, it was like something out of a movie, but it really honestly does seem like something out of a movie almost. Just the way it was executed, the setup for it, the presumed setup for it. This doesn't seem like a spontaneous thing. You know, what happened doesn't seem spontaneous. This is Best Shot on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, hotnewstalkradio.com. You can call in at 423-800-8949. That's 423-800-8949 is the number to call in here at Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and hotnewstalkradio.com. That's 423-800-8949. Like us on Facebook. That's Hot News Talk Radio on Facebook, and you can see our live streams on Facebook. If you're on YouTube, on your work computer or on your smartphone, you can go to YouTube and search for Hot News Talk Radio on YouTube, and you'll be able to actually watch us streaming live on YouTube. So go to YouTube and search for Hot News Talk Radio, and you can see us streaming live there. So the police chief, Mr. Brown, said that the suspects were believed to have been working together using rifles to carry out the attacks while the protest rally was drawing to a close. The two snipers fired from what he calls elevated positions, shooting some officers in the back, he said. Now, again, speaking as someone who's not a trained marksman, I'm not, I wasn't in the military or anything like that. I'm not trained to shoot at people. I'm not trained with weaponry. I am a novice shooter myself. I own a gun. I've shot it plenty of times. I wouldn't say that I'm a trained gunman, if that makes any sense. I'm not someone who's trained to use weaponry, so I have a little bit of novice experience. And just from reading things online, too, it seems like this doesn't happen spontaneously. Because if we're talking about, let's say the number's 3. If we're talking about three gunmen who have these rifles, high-powered rifles of some kind, I don't know what. It doesn't really matter if they're assault weapons. People talk, oh, the assault weapons. Oh, they were, AR-15s. It doesn't really matter what the guns were, because the gun doesn't matter as much as the act does. The act is murder, right? So 5 people are murdered now. Okay, that's the number. 4 people dead. 5 people dead, pardon me. That's what matters, not what gun was used. Because we talk about, oh, well, they used assault weapons. We need to stop assault weapons. It doesn't matter, because you could do the same exact thing with a bolt-action hunting rifle that you use to kill a deer in Alaska. So it doesn't matter what the gun is. People always harp about the weaponry involved. It doesn't matter. Stop deluding yourself. But anyway, it seems like there's some sort of setup going on here, though, because if we're talking about people on rooftops or at least high up in a building, they say elevated position. It could be a parking garage. That seems like an easily accessible place with not a whole lot of people where you could easily fire at somebody. If it's a parking garage or something like that, there seems like there has to be some sort of setup, some sort of coordination. Someone saying, okay, I'll be here and you be there, and we'll fire at this time, and I'll give you the signal, all these sorts of things. It seems like there has to be more coordination than immediately appears to be the case right now. Because the first thought is it's one guy, one crazy, but then they start talking about multiple suspects, and you start to wonder, is this organized somehow? And if so, by what organization or by what group of crazies? Because it doesn't need to be an organization with a name for there to be a conspiracy, because a conspiracy is an agreement to do something by 2 or more people. If there's some sort of conspiracy between some people to commit an act of murder, then that's conspiracy to commit murder in the first case. But also, that doesn't mean necessarily that there's an organized organization that you can point the finger at. Like as an example, Black Lives Matter. Like, Black Lives Matter has a defined name. You can donate to it. It exists as a entity. That's an organization. Just like, any other organization or any other nonprofit. You can point a finger at that and say, well, it was people from X organization, the neo-Nazi group of Georgia or whatever, you can point a finger at that and say, well, it was them. But if it's just a group of crazies, it's harder to point a finger, because you can say, well, it was this guy, or, well, it was that guy. But if it's just a group of people, it's harder to put together a motive. And what if it's just a spontaneous thing? That's weird to think about because there's no figuring out crazy people, assuming that these people are in fact crazy. There's no figuring out crazy people. People do nutso things because that's how people operate. People are pretty nuts if you think about it. I think about how people operate. We're actually kind of crazy. So it's a hard time. You have a hard time trying to figure out what crazy people are doing or what they are going to do. You can't predict crazy most of the time. So they talk about, well, why didn't the police stop them? Well, who knows? Maybe they didn't know it was going to happen. Even with all the surveillance apparatuses we have, maybe they just didn't know. It's a weird situation. So looking at the story from the BBC again, they're saying that the protests came after this week's shooting of Philando Castile in Minnesota and Alton Sterling in Louisiana. And the police chief says that 2 snipers fired from elevated positions. So the number appears to be 2, with 1 suspect in custody right now. Now, there's a map that shows a indoor park and a location of the gunman who was seen firing at police and then the area of the shooting. So imagine a 4-way intersection, and there's a building on one side, on one corner of the intersection on the left-hand side, and there's another building on the corner of the intersection on the top left-hand side. And it's sort of surrounded by buildings. It appears the shooting happened from one of the buildings in one of the corners, sort of like the book depository, if you remember that. In fact, this was oddly close to the JFK shooting, interestingly enough. The Dallas attack marks the deadliest day for law enforcement officers since the 9/11 attacks back in 2001. Officers later surrounded a car park near El Centro College where they had a standoff with the suspect. The Dallas mayor, Mike Rawlings, said that 2 civilians, 1 man and 1 woman, were also injured by the shootings. We don't know who they are. We don't know how they are doing. Apparently, the mayor said that the suspects are in custody, but they were tight-lipped. They are not cooperating with the police in terms of giving a statement, which you can't make them do anyway. They're at this point exercising their Fifth Amendment rights, so there's not much you can do about that. Mr. Obama said that anyone involved in these senseless murders will be held fully accountable. Obviously, that's a sort of non-committal statement. It's just, we're going to do something about it, I suppose. Alton Sterling was killed by police a day earlier than Philando Castile was shot when he was stopped in his car by police in St. Paul, Minnesota. Alton Sterling was killed in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Both incidents were captured on video, reigniting what has become a national debate. I've heard comparisons, by the way, to Rodney King, and I think that's fair, actually. That seems like a pretty fair comparison considering the reaction. There's not been riots per se, but definitely a much more obviously violent reaction than, say, the LA riots, just as an example. A much more overtly deadly reaction, assuming that this is a reaction to that, but it seems unlikely that it's not. So it's interesting developments that we're getting out of Dallas. Again, it appears the number now is 5 police officers shot, 2 civilians also injured. 5 policemen are dead, seems to be the current number, and several others are wounded after this shooting in Dallas. And we're trying to get more information, obviously, as it comes out. But the police chief has been very talkative with the media, which is always nice. The mayor has been as well. 5 police officers killed, 7 wounded in an ambush-style attack at a Dallas protest. That's the new number. 5 killed and 7 wounded in this attack after the Dallas protest. This is a very chaotic event, and from a reporter standpoint, especially when you're not actually there, it's incredibly difficult to know what exactly happened because now you have to compile videos from people who were at the scene, trying to put them in a cohesive timeline. You've got to get together reports from the police. Fortunately, we have recordings of the police scanner, which has been very, very useful for trying to find out what exactly happened during the chase for these 2 suspects. Listening to the police scanner was a real eye-opening experience for from a reporter standpoint, trying to figure out what's going on in the police mind when they're trying to find these suspects, and B, how it all goes down, what the real details are of what was happening. So there's a lot of interesting detail that comes out just from firsthand accounts, sort of eavesdropping in on the police as they're trying to find these people, which is perfectly legal to do, by the way. It's all on Broadcastify. You can find the police scanner for most cities, especially larger cities, on Broadcastify. It's always interesting to listen to. The Chattanooga police scanner is not particularly interesting most of the time just because not a whole lot happens around here. But when something does happen, it's always a great resource, especially when you know what's happening. For instance, during the bank robbery in East Ridge, the East Ridge police scanner was very interesting to listen to. I brought it up on my phone, actually, as I was driving by the First Tennessee Bank on Ringgold Road in East Ridge. It was interesting to listen to that. A little bit weird how that works out. We're going to talk more about Dallas. We're going to talk about what's on our Twitter account on Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240. That's Hot News Talk Radio on Twitter. Check us out on Twitter. Like us on Facebook, Hot News Talk Radio on Facebook. We're going to talk a little bit more about what's happened in Dallas. We're going to do a little bit of analysis about the actual shooting of those two men by the police. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes here on Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240 and HotNewsTalkRadio.com.
News Talk 1240 AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio with your chance to win $124 in cash and $124 in food every week with the Hot News Talk Radio 1, 2, 3 NASCAR contest. Hot News Talk 1240. All you have to do is guess who's going to be first, second, and third place in the upcoming NASCAR Sprint Cup race. If you guess it, you'll hear your name live Monday morning at 11:30. Then call AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio to win. Enter your guess right now at Rick Davis Golden Diamonds, 5301 Brainerd Road, Chattanooga. Wimpy's Restaurant in Soddy Daisy across from City Hall. Diesel Off-Road Technology Soddy Daisy. For your four-wheel drive and truck needs, stuff and upholstery with premium rubber foam. Cell Surgeon, the Broken Screen Dock. And Shooter's Supply, 4824 Hickson Pike in Hickson. Hot News Talk 1240. Enter your guesses now and listen to the race live to win $124 in cash and $124 in food from Chattanooga's official NASCAR radio station. Hot News Talk 1240. I love NASCAR. They're soaring worldwide. Prices for gold and silver are soaring worldwide. Rick Davis wants you to take advantage of them. Go to Rick Davis right now. Rick Davis Gold and Silver and get yours today. Your cash, and more cash. Go ahead, take advantage of them. Gold is soaring past $1,350 an ounce. That's $1,350 an ounce. Silver is out of this world too. Buy and sell at Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. Gold, silver, jewelry, rings, watches. Rick Davis has got what you want. Right on. Cash, and more cash. Rick Davis has got so much cash it's as tall as a billboard. And he wants to stuff it in your pocket. Cash, and more cash. Yours for the asking. Come on in today and watch metals rise up as high as Rick's billboard. Rick Davis Gold and Diamond, 5301 Brainerd Road. You know where it is. Come get your cash, and more cash.
Rubber's tough, but foam rubber is soft. Foam rubber is the star at Stuff It Upholstery, which uses it to revive your couch, your embarrassing easy chair, your boat seat cushions. Stuff It Foam Rubber in Hickson covers Chattanooga and surrounding areas. Don't throw out that favorite easy chair that's grown haggard and barbaric. New life for your seat cushions. Premium auto-grade rubber foam for your restaurant, church, or business. Stuff It Upholstery brings comfort and relief. Go ahead, skid away from flat, dull, and droopy cushions. Relax, restore, revive. When comfort matters, stuff it. 4608 Hickson Pike, 877-1616. Ask for Larry. That's 877-1616.
Finding just the right place to live can be a daunting task. Stop your search. In Chattanooga, the place to live is Cross Creek Villas for under $1,000 and available for immediate move-in. You can enjoy this 2-bedroom split layout, over 1,000 square feet, 9-foot ceilings, an extra-large patio or balcony. And don't forget to ask about their preferred employer program. Cross Creek Villas is a gated community, offering a 24-hour fitness facility, a beautiful pool and hot tub, and Cross Creek Villas is pet-friendly. Stroll the pet park with your best friend and enjoy the free use of their business center and clubhouse. Plus, if you mention you heard this on the radio, your application fee is free. Cross Creek Villas, close to downtown off of Highway 58. Go to crosscreekchattanooga.com. That's crosscreekchattanooga.com or call 894-0446. That's 894-0446. Redefine the way you live at Cross Creek Villas. Go to crosscreekchattanooga.com or call 894-0446. Cross Creek Villas.
Here comes Stay Alert Hard Earnhardt Jr., he's got third, he's going for second, Earnhardt going for the lead.
The NASCAR Sprint Cup Series is on the Motor Racing Network.
Fox News Talk 1240.
Hear it live on the Motor Racing Network, the voice of NASCAR.
Check it out live on Chattanooga's official NASCAR radio station. Fox News Talk 1240.
Hot 1240 Hot News Talk Radio with your Hot News Now update. Two men say that they were remodeling a house on Strawberry Lane when a man walked in with a claw hammer and bludgeoned them. One victim was struck twice in the head, smashed in the shoulder and the upper arm, and another victim was also hit in the arm. The two men told police that the attack was unprovoked, and the man who's accused of attacking them said that the two men had broken into his house. The defendant has been arrested and his case bound over to the grand jury. A newspaper carrier shot and 4 others injured, including a responding policeman in Bristol, Tennessee, when one man opened fire, randomly firing on people on a parkway. We don't know who the shooter actually is. The police have not released his name. However, they do have him in custody. The victim who was killed, 44-year-old Jennifer Rooney, was a mother who delivered the local paper and was driving to pick up papers for the morning delivery when she was shot and killed. If it's going on in the Tennessee Valley, it's going on Hot 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. Be sure to like us on Facebook and get us on the TuneIn Radio app on your smartphone.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Fox News Talk 1240.
If you know me, you know that I usually have an unpopular opinion about things, and this is no different. This is sort of a contradictory thing because I can get the best of both worlds, right, from both arguments. Here's my view of it. Here's my take of it. You had the shootings of those two guys, Philando Castile and Alton Sterling in Louisiana. Particularly the one in Louisiana was, I thought, particularly egregious. And I'll say, in that particular case, I don't really see much of anything he did wrong. I definitely don't see anything that he did that warrants being shot. You know, we talk about, well, you should follow police orders, and that's true. You know, that, obviously, because you don't want to put yourself in danger any more than the policeman wants to put himself in danger, right? Because although I am very libertarian, right, in my perspective, I'm very libertarian in my perspective. I will say that it's important to have empathy and think from the perspective of other people. If you can't do that, you're not going to understand other people's arguments. If you can't think from their perspective. And I'm not saying agree with their perspective. I'm saying learn to think from other people's perspective so you have a slight bit of empathy so you can see how the other conversation works or how the other argument works from the other person's perspective. And I understand how we talk about how the policemen are fearing for their lives at every stop. That makes sense because you hear horror stories about, you know, there's a video I saw not too long ago. It was a crazy, I think it was I don't want to peg every veteran, obviously, but I think he was actually a Vietnam or Korean War veteran who was crazy. And that's not because he's a Korean or Vietnam War veteran. He's somebody who may have had a proclivity for craziness already. But he pulled out, I think it was a M1 carbine, and shot a police officer, and the police officer, yes, he shot back, but it was kind of too late, and the cop died. And it's a horrific video because you can hear his screams and him stopping breathing. Horrible stuff. It's horrible stuff. And the man who shot the cop in that case is not at all justified. And the policeman didn't really do anything wrong. He was way too polite, actually, in that particular case. I was surprised how polite the guy was. So it's a double-edged sword, I guess. There are two perspectives, and it's not a black and white thing. That's a funny way to put it, but it's not a these people are always right and these people are always wrong sort of thing. Because in the case of Alton Sterling, I don't think he did anything wrong when he was reaching for his permit. I really don't see anything wrong. And I've watched the video a few times. I don't see much of anything that he did that was particularly wrong, that warrants being shot. And he was shot and he died. And was it a murder? Well, there's going to be a trial, right? There's going to be a trial and there might be a conviction, and he allegedly murdered him. He's now a defendant in a court case, right? So I can't say, as a reporter, I can't say one way or the other. Did he murder him? I don't know, because the court case hasn't happened yet. He's not been convicted of any crime as of yet. He may be exonerated and walk free, and that could very well happen because, it's Baton Rouge, Louisiana, so who knows? But it's a very conflicting situation if you think of things as purely black and white, and I don't mean racially. If you think of things as purely black and white, well, the police are always right, and people who are even slightly argumentative are always wrong. That's not always the case because situations are dynamic, right? Like situations are always a dynamic sort of thing. And I've read before, and I actually watched a video of a man who was a police detective for many, many years, and he does firearms instruction now, talking about how to handle a situation where you've been pulled over and you have a concealed carry weapons permit, and how to handle that so that you don't make the policeman think he's in any danger. Because the one thing, there are two words you want to avoid, according to the gentleman I watched on YouTube. There are two words you want to avoid: gun and weapon. The G and the W word. You don't say gun and don't say weapon. You say, and this is not, I'm not a lawyer, right? I'm not qualified to give any legal advice whatsoever, but the proper procedure, according to multiple sources I've read, is if you've been pulled over and you have a concealed carry weapons permit and you are currently carrying, you mention to the police officer and you say, as soon as you've been pulled over, he says license and registration. You say, okay, I just want to let you know though, I have a concealed carry permit. Don't say weapons permit. I have a concealed carry permit and I am currently carrying. How would you like to proceed? And that could actually save your life. Those words could actually save your life. And it's a shame that that's how things are today, but that's how things are today. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm saying that's a way that you could save yourself from being shot because a policeman thinks that you have a weapon and are ready to draw it on him. Because if you look at the video, and I'm not defending what happened at all. I'm just giving my analysis. I'm not saying what happened was good by any stretch of the imagination. But when you see him reach for his wallet, like I reach for my wallet, which makes me a little bit worried, when he reaches for his wallet, you could, if you glance away and look back, skew it as reaching for a gun. If you want to see it that way, right? Like if you're expecting that, that might be what you see in your mind. And yeah, there's a lot of adrenaline. There's a lot of anxiety going on there. So it's a dynamic situation, and the policeman didn't seem to have really act correctly in that situation where Mr. Sterling was shot. He was gunned down, I think 5 bullets while it was being live streamed on Facebook. And I have to say, thank goodness it was live streamed on Facebook, because now we have the evidence, because I could watch that video and analyze it for myself and see what I thought about it. If it was just statements, that's a whole nother story, because people lie, police and not alike. People lie. Police have lied before. I mean, it is Louisiana. People have lied before, and people who are victims have lied before. And you have to have everything with a bit of a grain of salt, because you read the police report, you can read them, and you read the witness statement, and you can read that. And you sort of, especially if there's a conflicting statement, it's sort of a story of, well, who am I going to believe here? Because it could be one or the other. I don't know. I usually will go with what the police statement is if it happens to make sense. And sometimes I'll go with what the witness statement is, but you can't make a solid judgment based on that. And really, it ultimately comes down to the court case. This is Best Shot here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240 and hotnewstalkradio.com. The number to call in is 423-800-8949. And it goes without saying, obviously, that no matter what you think about the shootings of Mr. Castile and Mr. Sterling, no matter what you think about that, if you're not even if you're anti-cop, because I think that's an unfair thing to say about someone who would oppose a shooting like that. That doesn't mean you're anti-cop, because I know policemen who have looked at different shootings like that and said that shouldn't have happened. It was an egregious thing. So it doesn't mean you're anti-cop when you're anti bad practice, right? Like, it doesn't mean that I'm anti-doctor when I criticize a doctor who left tools inside of a guy, because that happens a lot, actually. I'm not anti-doctor by any means, because I know lots of them, and a lot of them are great guys. My dad works at Erlanger, by the way. He's not a doctor. Works in HR, actually. I know a lot of doctors, a lot of surgeons, and they're great guys. I've met a few cops. I've been pulled over by a few cops, and they were great guys. So if I say something bad about a policeman or about what happened with a policeman, I'm not condemning the police force as a whole, right? I just want to make that clear. Now, we can make arguments about the structure of the police. Like, we could make arguments about, well, they enforce statute and perhaps they're acting unconstitutionally by the existence of the police department. Like, maybe that's unconstitutional. But that's not a condemnation in my mind of the actual individual, because there are people who work for the IRS who might be good people, right? There are people who work for various organizations I don't like who could be very good people. So not liking the organization is not a condemnation necessarily of the person who works within that organization, right? I don't like a lot of radio show hosts, but I don't think radio show hosts are bad people because, I am one. So it should go without saying, though, no matter what your perspective on the shootings of Castile and Sterling, it should go without saying that obviously killing 5 policemen and intending to kill 7, it appears, shooting 7 policemen is not the right course of action. There's no way to ever think that if you're a sane individual. Doesn't matter who you are, what color you are, what your political stance is. It doesn't matter. We all know that shooting 7 cops is not the right reaction when 2 men have been gunned down. It doesn't matter how many people have been shot. You don't just shoot other people like that. There's a legal way to go about things, and that's not really how you do it, especially because it almost always seems like whenever there's some sort of retaliatory shooting, like you remember the one in New York, it turns out like, well, they were basically the greatest people to ever walk the earth, So it always seems like they shoot the wrong people every single time. And whenever there's some sort of revenge killing like this, it never works out well. And obviously I shouldn't have to say that, and I don't, but I just want to throw that out there. There's not really much of any reason to go around randomly gunning down people. It's not justified, no matter how you might skew it in your mind. There's not a declared war. There's not any act of aggression immediately right there. They were appearing to be actually protecting a Black Lives Matter protest and not causing any violence as far as I know. So then you shoot them. It sort of creates chaos unnecessarily, and it makes people more paranoid. Which, again, I'm not saying that paranoia on the side of the police is a good thing or a bad thing. It just is what it is, right? I mean, that is how it is. It's not a condemnation or a celebration. It is what it is. So it's interesting, what's happened in Dallas, and certainly it keeps getting worse and worse, it seems, as we read more details about what's happened. In Dallas, there have been 7 policemen shot. 5 are now dead. The president made a statement while he was in Poland attending a NATO summit. He called it a vicious, calculated, and despicable attack on law enforcement. He said the entire city of Dallas was grieving and that the tight-knit U.S. police community feels this loss to their core. And the police chief, Mr. Brown, in Dallas, said that these suspects were believed to have been working together using rifles to carry out the attacks while the protest rally was drawing to a close. The 2 snipers fired from elevated positions, shooting some officers in the back. He says, "We believe that these suspects were positioning themselves in a way to triangulate on these officers from 2 different perches and plan to injure and kill as many law enforcement officers as they could," said Mr. Brown. It's a odd occurrence, that's for sure. It's not something that you would think would ever happen, especially if you live in Dallas. You wouldn't think that anything like this would ever happen. It's not something that we think of. Like here in Chattanooga, I can't imagine that ever happening. That's just not something that happens, because even people who don't like a certain group of people will just sort of deal with it. You know what I mean? It's like here in the South, we're so used to living around people who we disagree with that we just sort of deal with it, and we can be friends with basically anybody, right? Like I've got very liberal friends. I've got friends who are Canadian, and I don't like Canadians. I got friends. I'm friends with lots of different people who I disagree with, who I think their worldview is pretty messed up. And that's just how it is down here. We're pretty much okay with most people. We'll hang out with them with not much of any problem. And you just sort of avoid the subject that you happen to disagree on, because that's how we do it down here. It's just how you do it. And it's worth pointing out that people like to paint things as black and white all the time. And again, I don't mean racially, but I mean morally or perspective wise. People like to paint things as black and white all the time. Was the shooting of a guy in Louisiana, as our Twitter page says, government tyranny? Probably. Again, I don't know. Louisiana cops shoot and kill a man for selling CDs in front of a store. So is that government tyranny? Probably. The Twitter account for Hot News Talk Radio certainly says so. Does that mean that we suddenly hate all cops ever? No. It means we hate that action. That particular action is an act of tyranny. Does that mean that we hate everyone who's ever worked for the government ever? No. It just means that we don't like tyranny. It's a pretty simple concept. It's like a human commits a crime. Do we hate all humans ever? No. And I hope that's sort of obvious. Some people maybe have a problem understanding that, but yeah, it's a messed up world we live in. And honestly, it's not even as bad as it's been. People talk about how the political climate is more violent than it's ever been. That's not true by any stretch of the imagination. People who've obviously not been around the 60s, like I heard a particular radio show host the other day say that this was the most chaotic and most violent political situation, climate he had ever seen in his lifetime. And I was thinking, were you alive in the 60s and 70s? Because it was pretty bad back then. Remember I think it was either the Republican or Democratic National Convention. I don't remember. I think it was the RNC where Dan Rather was knocked down. I mean, that's like something that wouldn't happen today because they're so uptight about everything now, where something like that means immediate lawsuit. Back in the 60s, things were a lot different. The 60s and 70s, things were so much different. I think about the riots, right? Like, you don't have the National Guard deployed on college campuses and shooting people. You don't have that here and now. You don't have that. So obviously things are not as bad now as they were back then. And you might even say that things are actually getting better as the years go on. In fact, gun violence, believe it or not, is on a net decline. People are overall getting happier and happier, which I don't know why, but things are actually getting better, believe it or not. And I know it doesn't seem like that all the time, but I think a big contributor to that, and I'm guilty of this too, a big contributor to that is the media constantly reporting on every single negative thing that ever happens and always painting the outlook of the world in a mega negative light. And yeah, awful things happen every day. And I know 24 news stations have to have something to talk about. I get that. Something that would normally be a story for a local station is on the national news. And I understand that because you have a 24-hour news cycle and that's just how they operate. But it does add a lot to the negativity that we see. And that might even have an impact on economy, which is an interesting thing to think about. I was thinking about this the other day, just thinking about the whole local economy thing. Positivity plays a huge factor in economics, and it's one of those things that's really hard to control as well. People having a positive outlook has a positive effect on the economy. And I don't just mean stocks go up in this particular company because people feel good about it, like Enron. People feel good about it, so I guess it's going to go up. No, I mean even locally too. The local economy philosophy, if you feel optimistic about a certain business, there's more likelihood that it's going to survive. Like if everyone thinks, well, this business downtown isn't going to make it, it's probably not going to make it. But even if it's the exact same business and people have the outlook of, hey, I bet it's going to make it, it probably will. Isn't that the weird thing? I mean, isn't that an odd thing to think about? It seems like having a positive outlook, just generally speaking, can actually help you out far more than it harms you. That's an odd thing to think about, I know, but it seems like that is actually the case. Having a positive outlook can positively affect you. Think about how we are very negative right now in America, and I think most places in the world are very negative right now just because things seem to be going downhill constantly. Things seem like they're collapsing all the time. And I think we need to understand that there are elements that are out of our control, and constantly worrying about them isn't really going to help our sanity any. Like, can you do something about what happened in Dallas? No, probably not. The police are going to investigate what happened in Dallas. People are going to get arrested. There's going to be, a statement from the police. Stressing out about it isn't really going to change anything for you other than just make you feel worse. Stressing out about these things isn't really going to make you feel any better. It's not going to make your life any better. It's not going to affect your life in a positive way at all. And for Christians, this comes from comfort in Christ, is how it's called, because we know that God's in control of everything. We understand that, well, God is in control. Things look like they're going very badly, but this is according to the plan. That's the Christian perspective on these things. And the secular perspective tends to be a lot more pessimistic. And that's why I think Christian areas tend to thrive a lot more than non-Christian areas, because we tend to be a lot more optimistic about how things are going. We say, well, things are bad, but you know what? They've been worse before. And if it gets worse, that's not up to me. That's not my decision. But we can affect our own lives by deciding, hey, you know what? Today, I'm not going to stress out about much. And it's funny how just saying that to yourself can make a huge difference. It's weird how that works because I'll admit I suffer from anxiety constantly. And just saying, I'm not going to stress out about this helps me a lot. So just sharing a little bit of that personal experience with you, I hope might help you out a little bit. Just say, you know what? I'm not going to stress out about this so much. Because yeah, bad things are happening. We're reporting on what's happening in Dallas. It's a terrible thing and it needs to be reported. The word needs to get out. But should we feel like we can do anything about it? We really can't. And that sounds hopeless, but it should allow us to focus on what's happening here locally. I think constant national reporting is really hurting us more than it's helping us, in the sense that we feel like we are responsible somehow. We feel like we can affect things somehow when really we actually can't. And we would be doing the world a much bigger favor by worrying about what's happening here locally and doing something about what's happening here locally. You know, your neighborhood could be falling apart around you and there could be something you could do about it. But instead, we're stressing out about what's happening maybe across the pond, right? Like we're worrying about Brexit instead of worrying about what's happening in Chattanooga downtown. It seems like maybe our mental resources could be allocated more efficiently. You know, that's just my perspective on that. But I want to share that with you because things are looking pretty grim right now nationally. I'll say that. Things are looking pretty grim nationally in terms of relations between people, in terms of how we feel about people in power, in terms of how we feel about our neighbors around us. And I want to pose this question, I suppose. I want to sort of pose this. If you are feeling negative about things, right, are you going to treat other people perhaps more harshly than you should? Probably, because if you're in a bad mood, you're going to be harsher with other people. That's just how people are. Maybe having a positive outlook could actually affect your relationship with other people. But think about this too. Does what's happened in Dallas affect your relationship with, say, the local police officer who lives down the street from you? Probably not. At least it shouldn't anyway. Or does it affect your relationship with your neighbor who happens to be black? Should you think any differently about him because of what's happened in Dallas? No, it doesn't affect him and it doesn't affect you. It doesn't affect your personality and it doesn't affect his personality. There's no reason for there to be tension there. That's the beautiful thing about local economy. That's the beautiful thing about how we think about it. It doesn't matter if you're black or white. It might matter to you, and that's fine. You know, you should care about who you are, and that's great. And we should respect who other people are. People are different, and that's kind of okay, actually. You know, trying to make all of us the same isn't going to fix anything. It's just going to make everything worse. But respecting that, yeah, this guy is different from me. He has some different beliefs. He acts a little bit differently than I do, and that's okay because he can do that. He's free to do that. He has the right to do that. Cool. Freedom of speech, right? He can walk down the street a little bit differently than me if he wants to. But you know what? Maybe this guy's a Muslim. I'll shop at his store. That doesn't affect how I think about his business at all. Because if he's affecting the local economy in a positive way, I don't care what he is. And that's kind of the nice thing about that perspective is it's a very capitalistic perspective is I don't care if you're black or you're white or you're Indian, you're Hispanic, to use that archaic term, or maybe you're Latino. You're someone who comes from South America. Maybe you're someone who comes from Europe. You're an immigrant from Russia. I don't particularly care. I mean, I do, but not in a business sense. It doesn't really matter to me. I'd love to hear your story. I'd love to talk to you about the differences between us and how it is where you're from and all that sort of thing. That's always very interesting to talk about. But from a business perspective, you'd be a fool to say, well, I'm not going to shop from him because he's from Latin America. You'd be not shopping at a lot of stores. Or I'm not going to shop with him because he's black. And conversely, I'm not going to shop with him because he's white. It doesn't make any difference at all what color somebody is. They run a good business. They run a good business. And having race affect that, having creed affect that is not a good way to run a good local economy. And that's why I love the idea about local economy, because honestly, it brings people together way more than any government program ever could. Any government program ever. We're affecting this. It's us. The power is with us, not with expecting some government program to come in and affect diversity or whatever. The power is with us. Don't wait for other people to take action for you. Do it yourself. That's capitalism. That's entrepreneurship. That's investing in yourself. That's social entrepreneurship. Let it flow from you. You can do things for yourself and not wait for other people to do them for you. Are you thinking about starting up a new business? You can talk to people. Talk to Bruce Krebs about maybe starting up a franchise that could actually affect the local economy. that could actually affect you, your neighbors. You could make money. You could provide good services to other people. You could hire your neighbors. All sorts of great things can come from that. And guess what? The government doesn't play any part in that. It's a great thing. So I just want to add that little bit of positivity to your day. I know that sounds a little bit holistic maybe, but I want to add that positivity to your day here after the bad news that we've had. Very bad news. Tragedy happened in Dallas. This has been Best Shot here on Hot News Talk Radio. I hope you have a good weekend. I really mean that. I hope you have a good weekend. This is Hot News Talk Radio, AM till 40, hotnewstalkradio.com. Colin Cowherd, one of the greatest sports people ever, coming up next, but not as good as Keon Rose, who's on at 6.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds,